Thank you very much for inviting me to share our experience at Bradford United Church of working with our local artists and musical performers and dramatic performers and developing the Bradford Art Centre over the last 3 years. It's definitely a work in progress, but what I will share with you is how we got started on this, what's been happening, what our challenges are, what really lasting and good effects it's had on the church and the larger community. So actually, it was probably about 5 years ago, the congregation started to look at revisioning and clarifying their vision and who they were, why they kept going to this building, what they had to share with other people, and how they would do that. And out of that, they were able to develop a good sense of who they were and a sense of self-confidence as a church that they had come to because they had had good experiences, and that's why they were still there. And it had been a church right up until the last 20 or 30 years. It was very much a hub in the larger community of Bradford. And they still were people very active in different areas of the community, and they wanted to continue that and do it in a more corporate fashion, sharing their experience as a church community in ways that they could participate with other members of the larger community. And out of discussions and surveys, they decided that the arts was one area more people than any other in the community were involved in and were interested in. So in June 2016, we held a couple of focus groups with visual artists, musical performers, dramatic artist folk, to see if there was a possibility that what we were thinking of doing, which was to develop a place where people could come and local artists would be nurtured and given the opportunity to perform in a professional experience and have in a professional location rather, and to nurture young folk in giving them the opportunity, a low barrier entry into developing and building and exploring their artistic possibilities through different medium. The group of people that had come together said yes, and they had some suggestions. They loved the audio experience of our chapel area of the church. Just a tremendous audio sound there, and we decided to see if we could collaborate. So we had our first event in the end of July 2016. We had a beer Bach concert. We had a great concert pianists, and we served beer and we discussed Bach, and we were competing with a ribs concert at the same time, and we actually had 90 people come to the concert, so it was a great success. We then started exploring. We had a dramatic arts performance. We had an arts exhibition, and worked with a local festival, the Carrot Fest, and bringing people to our space during that festival to see what we're doing, and we gave a wonderful spot for local artists to show their paintings and sell their paintings and so on. From there, we decided, yes, this is something we want to go ahead with. The congregation was comfortable. There was an openness in the larger community. We got a small grant from the town right away that year in 2016, and we established the Bradford and a basic constitution for the Bradford Art Centre, which, from motions from the church, was a collaborative effort with the church retaining ownership of any of the equipment, and obviously at the church's pleasure, the groups continued to perform, but the actual operation of the Art Center itself is left to a nonprofit organization that we were able to bring into our fold the Bradford Fine Artists Society. So it's been, since then, it's been truly a collaborative effort between particularly the Bradford United Church and the Bradford Fine Artists Society, in partnership with other local artists and performers to grow this thing we call the Bradford Arts Centre. Our first year of performances, we learned a lot. We found that we were bringing in top-notch performers, young emerging artists, but they had no following here, so they had low attendance. From that, we started developing a formula which is working in terms of our concert series. We have 3 or 4 events, well, maybe 6 events during the year. 4 of them are tapping into local resources. For instance, we're developing a very interesting way to collaborate with both schools and private and non-private musical and artistic schools. We provide them the opportunity to perform here. We split the take, and we get their young people performing here, getting that opportunity to perform to a wider audience than they normally would. We get the opportunity to expose the rest of the community to this wonderful art that's developing, and that's been very, very successful. We're getting good attendance to all those events. When we have a local artist or a local choir play, we get good attendance. Then we really promote and have one. Really, we pay a little extra, get a really good performer in, and so that's the formula we're going to go ahead with. Mainly having local artists and saving up, so to speak, to have some really fine national performer or whatever come. The second thrust of the program that's developed quite well is providing a low barrier opportunity for youth to explore the art and various art forms, and also to form together in a safe environment, friendships, and at a low barrier, like no cost. So we started that last year, and we had a very successful summer season where we had a drop in, but we were able to get enough kids to commit to put on The Wizard of Oz, which was a real success. Since then, we've running an afternoon program on Thursdays, which will expand to another day, afternoon, where we have high school students coming in to do performance art, and the grades 6 to 8, sometimes grade 5, depending on the maturity, coming in and doing visual art. We're going to continue working hard to find the best ways to provide this opportunity of self-exploration and artistic exploration for young people. We had a wonderful concert just a couple of weeks ago. It was the Artistic Youth Showcase, and we had great musical performances by vocalists from one of the private schools. We had spectacular, I think, young artists showing their paintings and their different visual art in our hall, which was just seen at intermission and before and after the concert. And we had a great performance monologue by a young lad who was really interested in General Isaac Brock and did a great rendition of Brock. So those things are moving along. What we've learned is one of our biggest struggles is because the Arts Center is attached to the church, and you got to understand, in Bradford, we've got 14 churches. And so it's been, especially with myself playing the leadership role, I'm the minister of Bradford United Church, but also been the lead role for the Bradford Arts Center. So there's been a lot of backbiting. That's a church activity. There's a lot of people that don't like churches that have been reticent to do things. So the learning curve we've learned there, and it's interesting because I'm into a whole succession plan, and because I'm leaving in a couple of months, I'm going to go into interim ministry, and we need the person, the figurehead, the person really interacting with the larger community, not to be a church member. That doesn't mean it's not a church activity. It's just to break down some of those barriers. We've been, I would say, the other thing is the church. We have participants from our church congregation who are heavily involved in this the art center, but there's still somewhat of a reticence. They still are having a hard time of relating this to church, many people. On the other hand, I think one of the best experiences that started to break this down, we were going to, when we started the drop-in program, we wanted to use the our conference room for a meeting place for some of the youth. And somebody said, well, that's what the choir always practices in there. This is in front of the board when we were talking about whether we could do this or not. And then, well, how long have they practiced there? For over 30 years. Well, couldn't they practice somewhere else? And then everybody burst out laughing. They realized they were so stuck in the way they did church that maybe they should start looking at a lot of different ways they do church. So that's a slow process in building this kind of interface. It's been very well received by the local politicians and people on their arts, in the arts community here. Some who don't like religion have kept away from us, but that's okay. We've gotten financial support and other types of support from the official of the town of Bradford, and in turn we've participated and contributed in a great way, deal with a number of their activities. For instance, we just had a vigil several weeks ago for the terrible massacre of Muslims in New Zealand, and we led that, and we also brought the musicians, who a bagpiper and a soloist who performed at that. Many other civic occasions we've helped out. So we're a work in progress. We've got a brand in the community. We've got wonderful connections with the local artists, and we're making good inroads in the schools, who are slowly sending some of their students, or the students are just dropping in. So that's where we're at after 3 years. It's been one way. It hasn't increased our attendance in our church. It's been said we have new people coming to the church, but then there's older people that aren't here anymore. And the church hasn't been trying to gauge this activity in those terms, but what it has done, it's really renewed our role in the larger community, and we are seen as a hub, and we are seen as a very valuable member of the community. So those are a few things I'd like to point out as far as what we've done. It's a small church. We have only 102 members or something. We have 40 to 60 people on a Sunday worshiping, and we've been able to get funding from the town and from the former presbytery to enable us to do good upgrades in the church that make it air conditioning. The redoing of the whole basement area, 1,400 square feet, that we can use for exhibition for the Art Center or for other activities of the church. And that's all because we are making a contribution to the larger community. Okay, so that, I don't know if anybody has any questions, but that's what I have to share.